AITA for punishing my daughter for not coming to my wedding. I got married last weekend in my parents' house, which has been in the family for generations. For health reasons, only immediate family was there. My daughter, 16F, had been calling her new stepmom, 21F, names like homewrecker and prostitute, and I have been patient with her. She assumes I left her late mother because she had breast cancer. However, I did not leave her mother for having cancer. Nobody decides to have cancer. However, her late mother kept using her illness to devalue me and my sense of identity. She'd criticized the way I was taking care of her, and even stuff like my hygiene or the cologne I was wearing. She made me feel worthless, and I felt like she was projecting her own insecurities by saying the smell of my cologne was disgusting because she never made an effort to keep herself up. And despite the fact that I objectively found her disgusting sometimes, I stuck by her until my self-esteem was destroyed. I would work hard, closing deals all day, and be acknowledged for my efforts at work. Yet I'd go home and she'd criticize and nag about every ounce of my being. I met her stepmom when I was in a dark place. She made me feel like I could be myself again. My wife made me feel unattractive and sexless, and with my new wife, I felt alive. Just the fact that she appreciated me and felt physical chemistry with me made me want to do anything for her, to want to provide for her. That's when I decided not to bullshit my wife anymore and file for divorce. Since then, my daughter's relatives from her mum's side had been poisoning her against me. Last weekend, when I and her stepmom went to the site of the wedding early, we expected to see her drive to the wedding later. But instead, she ended up going to stay with her aunt. Everybody asked where she was, and there was chaos from my side of the family locating her. As punishment, I took her car and allowance away and have taken her phone away until I feel that she can learn to be respectful towards someone I very much love, and that it will be impossible for her to do that if she keeps having to hear from her late mum's side of the family. My parents have called and said that I was being too harsh. However, even when things are tough, I feel I cannot let a child of mine believe they can just do whatever they want. AITA for sending my family an angry email because they still speak to my ex-husband and even have him over, especially in light of his present relationship with a girl 20 years younger than him. So basic background is, I'm 42, 2 kids age 14 and 12, and signed divorce papers in April after almost 2 years of it being dragged out, trying to get my fair share from him. The details of why are not important, but I'm angry, embarrassed, lost, and sad any given moment of the day. A lot of this has to do with feeling like I've been replaced by a 23-year-old surfing instructor who is everything I'm not. My husband and kids claim that she is just his friend and helping him learn his lifelong desire to surf. But Jesus Christ, give me a break. My husband has primary custody because he had better lawyers who were able to manipulate some minor missteps on my part into the courts seeing them as a huge deal. So this past weekend, I picked up the kids and said we were going to visit my parents. They said they would rather use their season passes to SeaWorld since they spent all weekend with my parents and Aunt Stacy and Uncle Brian, my brother and sister, who I didn't even know were in town. I was like, "Your dad took you?" They said yes, that my parents had invited him over to see everyone. I was devastated because while I don't get along with my brother and sister and my mum, they let my ex-husband know they were coming and not me. I can't even let that sink in without tears forming. I sort of jested that, "Oh, and let me guess, Miss Surf Instructor was there too." My daughter said, "Well, actually, we all went to her house in Ocean Beach because she gave Stacy and Brian lessons after hours." That included my mum and dad. I was so devastated, I took the kids back home and just went home and cried for an hour. When I was done, I sent a furious email to my entire family how inappropriate they all had been, and then not only hanging out with my ex for an entire weekend, but his little Chippy as well, is a massive slap in the face, and the fact they didn't even tell they were in town, let alone invite me, makes me feel so alone. My mum was the only one to respond, and she basically said, "Yes, it was rude we didn't tell you, Stacy and Brian were here, and we shouldn't have done that. But we didn't divorce Bradley, and we still see him as a son." This email, along with your behavior over the last 5 years, should really give you insight into why we might not want you at family events. In so many words, she called me an asshole for sending the email. AITA for using money we earmarked for our 6-month-old's college fund to buy back the exact 1972 Ford Bronco I owned as a teenager. So how to begin with this? I realize that on paper I am totally the asshole, but when you dig deeper into my motivations, I'm hoping it's more of a grey area than anything else, and maybe even I did the right thing. When I was a teenager, my dad bought me a classic 1972 Ford Bronco. It was my true passion, and I don't recall a memory from high school that somehow doesn't involve that truck. Plus, my dad and I would spend hours and hours working on it together. And we went through that especially father-son rough patch when I was a teenager. It was always that Bronco that brought us back together. I made a huge mistake and sold the truck when I turned 19, and my dad died of a heart attack 2 months later. So while not logical, I've always felt a karmic connection between the two events. We had a baby in early February. She is our first and the light of my life. My wife is doing well, but she's back at work, and she's realized that she hates all the daycares we've tried, and really wants to be a stay-at-home mum. And plus she's still very hormonal from delivery, lack of sleep, and breastfeeding, so she's having a rough time, and is angry a lot. I guess I need to say this. 2 weeks ago I was driving through our town's warehouse district, and saw a Bronco that was pretty beat up, but resembled mine. I stopped just for nostalgia's sake, and the owner came out and let me take a look inside. My dad and I had glued a wheat penny under the dash as sort of security measure, so I just sort of checked, and goddamned if it wasn't my Bronco. I asked him if he'd ever consider selling it. He said, actually someone was on I-25 as we spoke, from Colorado, to buy it for $21,000. I freaked out, and asked him if I could buy it right then and there for $23,000. He said if I could come up with the cash, yes. I had been procrastinating setting up a 529, so I had $12,000 in savings that my wife's parents had given us. I maxed out my credit card to Venmo, and my mum brought down a check for $4,000, and I fucking drove away in my old car. It was like a dream come true, like a literal dream come true. It needs a lot of work I can't afford right now, but it's mine, like in my driveway mine. Again. I can't even describe what a joy this is. My wife and her parents are furious with me. They feel I was deceptive, that a real man would have sacrificed anything and everything so my wife could go stay at home with his kids. And that's setting aside that they gave us the money for a college fund. My point is my daughter is only 6 months old. We have 18 years to set up a college fund of her. But this Bronco means everything to me, and if I wouldn't have acted, it would have been gone forever. Now it can be that same connection between me and my kids. To me, it's the literal meaning of happiness. Like I said, on paper, asshole, whole story, grey area. How do you guys see it? AITA for not apologizing to my former bully for what my mum did to ruin her life. I, 30 female, have a mum, 51 female, who I love dearly despite her not being the best. When I say not being the best, I don't mean she was directly or purposely harmful to me. She just had a lot of mental health issues that prevented her from being the most present parent. The most responsible and loving thing that she could do for me was give my dad, 57 male, primary custody, and didn't fight the court's recommendation for supervised visits until I was a teen. Without fail, my mum always showed up to my birthdays, gave me presents, and called me on holidays, and went to as much events as she could for me. While I was sad that my mum wasn't around all the time, my parents always made sure I knew that it wasn't my fault, and that my mum was just sick. I never really had an issue with that explanation until Tamara, 30 female, made fun of me for not having a mummy who loved me enough to want me. In her world, when parents split up, the mum always got the kids unless she didn't love them. That's how it started in elementary school, and then Tamara started bullying me for other things. I used to come home crying multiple times, and my dad went to the school with this issue repeatedly, but since none of the adults were around when Tamara's alleged bullying happened, there wasn't much that was done. For the longest time my mum didn't know about any of this, because Dad feared that she would make it worse. However, when my mum saw how visibly upset I was, I broke down and told her everything. My hair was the result of Tamara accidentally spilling a mix of blue and blue paint on top of my head. My mum was very calm and comforting the whole time, and asked me for Tamara's full time and any other description that I could give of her, her parents, and the type of car they drove. My dad eventually was able to get me over to another school, and the following year my mum paid for me, my dad, and her to go to Mouse World in Florida. I never saw or heard from Tamara again until recently, when she and I discovered that her boyfriend was living in the same apartment complex as me. Tamara recognized me immediately and confronted me about how my mum and I ruined her life. I had no idea what she was talking about, and Tamara told me that my mum had an affair with Tamara's dad and revealed it at Tamara's birthday party. I didn't believe her and just walked away, Then when I told my mum about it, she admitted to everything and even said that the money she used to pay for our family trip came from Tamara's dad. I was shocked. I did some digging, and apparently Tamara's parents had a bitter divorce, were forced to sell the house, and to this day, Tamara feels a certain level of dread around her birthday. My mum feels no remorse, as in her eyes, it was all Tamara's fault for being a bully in the first place. I definitely feel like my mum went way overboard, despite understanding the why. But am AITA for not giving an apology? AITA for clearing out my ex-boyfriend's childhood room in the home where he grew up. I moved in with my significant other of 2 years after my pay was reduced in February due to everything that's been happening, and it didn't make financial sense for me to live in my own apartment anymore. My SO asked me to move in with him, so I took up his offer. My SO is my ex-BF's dad, and I'm now living in the home where my ex-BF grew up. My ex doesn't visit the house at all. I suggested to my SO that we should move everything out of my ex's childhood room. Let me use it to store some of my stuff, and let me use it as my personal office/lounging room. My SO agreed, so I boxed up everything in my ex-BF's childhood room and moved them to the garage, including the furniture. I've redecorated the room and made it mine. Before I even moved his things, I emailed my ex about this and told him he should come by and take a look at what he wants to keep and/or sell and/or donate. After not hearing from him for 3 weeks, today he texts me, calling me all sorts of names for clearing out and taking his room. I'm really trying to be sensitive and nice here, but he is making this very difficult with his rage-filled outbursts and texts. My SO and I are giving him a year to clear out his childhood stuff from the garage before I donate everything. Neither my SO nor I feel clearing out his room was inappropriate, but my ex is just melting down in tantrum-filled rage. Why does my ex feel like he owns his childhood room when he doesn't even visit?